The philosophical perspective of the self. There are two primary schools of thought in philosophy: rationalism and empiricism. The view that reason is the primary source of all knowledge, and that only our reasoning abilities can enable us to understand sense experience and reach accurate conclusions, is called rationalism. The view that sense experience is the primary source of all knowledge, and that only careful attention to sense experience can enable us to understand the world and achieve accurate conclusions, is called empiricism. Concerning the theory of the philosophical perspective of the self, one can look at the self by studying how these schools of thought in philosophy affect me as a person or individual. Hence, high expectations that students have a deep understanding or mastery of the philosophy of the human person. Learning objectives. At the completion of this topic, the students must be able to explain the importance of the self, differentiate the different philosophers' philosophical theory about the self, familiarize with the different aspects of the self, distinguish the difference of rationalism and empiricism, understand the self in a philosophical perspective, and discuss the unity of consciousness of Kant. The philosophical perspective of the self. Socrates is often referred to as one of the founders of Western philosophy, and he wrote nothing, established no school, and held no particular theories of his own. One of the most important things that one should not forget in Socrates' philosophy is the Socratic method or the dialectical. This method would mean a new way of examining what we think. In other words, a simple method of questioning that brought to light the often false assumptions on which particular claims to knowledge are based. Though he had many followers, such as Playdoh, Cebes, etc., he was degraded and persecuted by the Sophists to death, on charges of corrupting the young people's minds, on society's destabilization. The unexamined life is not worth living is Socrates' greatest philosophy about the purpose of life. What is the purpose of life? To be happy. But the key to happiness is not to be found in the goods that one accumulates or even the projects that form the ingredients of one life, but rather in the agency of the person himself who gives her life a direction and focus. Now, to deepen the philosophy of Socrates concerning the purpose of life, one must know the absoluteness of good and evil. In other words, humanity is to have a good experience, and growth can only be worth living if one knows the absolute good and evil. One can only understand good and evil in the form of questioning and reasoning, because this is the only way that morality and knowledge are to be bounded. Thus, a man that is living in an unquestioning life is ignorant, that is, without character. But what does the examination of life mean? A good life is the only life worth living. the possibility in living a good life if one must know what the good and evil are. In this way, morality and knowledge are bound together, precisely because an unquestioning life is one of ignorance, that is, without morality. In other words, knowledge is inseparable with morality, that is, the reason for continually examining oneself. Thus, the life which is unexamined is not worth living. Playdoh. According to Playdoh, everything in this world is a shadow of its ideal form in the world of ideas. What is more critical for Plato's philosophy is that of an individual's mind, because this is the only absolute that perfects man's nature. How does this happen? There must be a world of ideas. This world is a world of concept that is unchangeable, and this is separate from the material world. According to Plato, the world that we are living in is the world of sense. For example, the fruit apple concept, although there are varieties of an apple in the world of the senses, once the apple is not physically present, it exists in mind. Therefore, the world of the reasons is the shadow of the world of ideas, because the one perceives only through experience, so the act of perception to something isn't perfect. According to Plato, the human being is divided into a body and a soul. The psyche or the soul possesses reason for which one can perceive the realm of ideas, while the agency has to distinguish sense in the material world. The tripartite soul. Why is Plato considering the world of ideas as the real world? Precisely because the psyche or the soul's concept comprises three elements that he characterizes as reason, appetite, and spirit, or passion. The psyche is the totality of the whole self. René Descartes, the founder of modern philosophy. Man exists if he thinks. Sometimes, evil persuades a man and making him believe that there are things to be false, although there is nothing of which for a man that he can be sure. But he can only be satisfied when he says, I am, I exist, precisely because man is rational by nature. His philosophical tool starts from his book Meditation on First Philosophy. The focal content of this book is on the I. According to Descartes, at least once in your life, you have to doubt, because it is the only way to seek after truth. But one should not be alarmed about questioning. Sometimes, one should ask why we need to follow the state of affairs laws. If we want to exist, we have to ask questions and reasons according to the truth. To question something is not by having faith, but having a rock-solid belief, having a solid foundation of personal philosophy in life. In Meditation 2, the cogito ergo sum. That is the first principle of Descartes' theory of knowledge, because this comprises the whole self as being aware of the self. This is the key to personal identity. Having this identity is an integral part of self-consciousness. These two are mutually dependent on one another. In other words, they are inseparable. His approach is very Platonic for one of the psyche's attributes, or the soul is thinking. And this is the only tangible thing that is undeniable from the self. Therefore, by answering the question, what am I? Then the I and me is a thinking thing. The same principle with Playdoh. Descartes has been distinguished the self as a thinking entity with the self as a physical body. The thinking soul is immortal, independent of the physical laws of the universe, and conscious. In contrast, the physical body is a mortal, material, non-thinking entity. It depends on the physical requirements of the world. Whether the physical body likes it or not, it is bound to it. Therefore, Plato and Descartes share the philosophy in terms of the metaphysical dualistic view of reality. John Locke. No knowledge of man can go beyond his experience. Innate ideas mean inborn ideas. One has already acquired knowledge, self-knowledge before experience. But, according to Locke, there are no truths found in everyone at birth, even in cultures. To explain further, rationalists believe that we are born with some ideas and concepts, that they are innate. But this is not borne out by the fact that there are no truths that are found in everyone at birth, and there are no universal ideas found in people of all cultures at all times. Therefore, everything we know is gained from experience. David Hume. He becomes skeptical about the problem of knowing where he forcibly against the idea that humans were born with innate ideas. The essential thought that one can gain ideas about the philosophy of David Hume is that the human mind is of two kinds of phenomena: the impressions and ideas. Impressions or sensations are the sources of our knowledge, that is, where it comes from. While ideas or thoughts are contents of our knowledge, that is, what it is. The term impression or direct perception is the human sensations, passions, and emotions, whereas the characteristics that are soft copies of our beliefs, our thoughts, reflections, and imaginings. One has the ideas that cannot be supported by our impressions. Therefore, it is that one should understand the contention of Hume concerning rationalism, that there are only two kinds of statements to consider, namely, demonstrative and probable. A demonstrative statement, for example, 2 + 2 = 4, one cannot understand this statement without a priori knowledge concerning it. In other words, one cannot know something about things to be true or false without knowledge before it. A probable statement, one has to come to know about something to be true or false through confirmation. For example, John is playing Mobile Legends. If John is playing ML, one will go and see if John is playing that game. Therefore, through investigation, experimentation, etc., are proofs to confirm whether they are truth or falsity. Immanuel Kant. According to him, there are two worlds: our bodies and the external worlds. there are two elements of knowledge, one of which gained from direct sensibility, that is, intuition. An example to this is when one is holding a thing, such as a book or any. The other aspect of knowledge that comes indirectly from the human's viewpoint understanding is the concepts aspect. For example, seeing the reader in mind as a concept and knowing the book in itself as a substance. In other words, one understands what the book is and its significance. But the assertions of Kant that both reason and experience are necessary to understand the world. In other words, for an individual to know about his beingness, that is, the self, one must be acquainted with the beliefs of both rationalist and empiricist. That is called transcendental idealism. Therefore, there is a unity of consciousness. Sigmund Freud. According to him, understanding the self requires consciousness, and it has three levels of awareness: conscious, preconscious, and unconscious. The conscious level consists of all things that we are aware of, such as things that one knows about themselves and their surroundings. The preconscious level consists of one attention that is being desired and reminiscing of memories that are easy to retrieve. The unconscious level consists of things that one is not aware of their surroundings. For example, thoughts that are unpleasant and conflicting, such as sexual impulses, etc. Freud developed a more structural model of the mind. The id is our instinct, the ego is our reality, and the superego is our morality. Thus, they are not physical areas within the brain, but rather hypothetical conceptualizations of important mental functions. Gilbert Ryle. Many thinkers regard his philosophical theory on the mind concept as an immaterial mind or dissolved, and the soul as a non-material substance. The mind-body problem is called the category mistake. He considered the body as a machine, while the mind-soul was the machine's ghost. Paul and Patricia Churchland helped persuade philosophers to pay attention to neuroscience. To understand the mind, we have to understand the brain. Theory of dualism: the mind and the body are separated. They argue that our self is our brain. According to Maurice Merleau-Ponty, mind or consciousness cannot be defined formally in terms of self-knowledge or representation, but is essentially engaged in the human world's structures and actions and encompasses all of the diverse intentional orientations of human life. Thank you.